There's a moment in history that almost nobody talks about anymore. It happened in showrooms across America, from California to New York, sometime in the early 1960s. A man walks past rows of long, chrome-heavy American cars the size of boats, cars that drank fuel like they were trying to drain a lake, and he stops. Right there, tucked between the domestic giants, sits something small, something low, something British, and he chooses it. Not because it was cheap, not because it was practical, because it was alive. That car was the Triumph TR4, and what it represented was something the British motor industry was capable of building when it was at its absolute best, before the politics, before the mergers, before the slow and painful collapse of everything that made those cars worth wanting. This is the story of the TR4, a sports car that conquered the American market, won races at Sebring, and was designed by an Italian working out of Turin. A car so good, so honest, so brilliantly conceived, that it makes what came after even more painful to understand. Because what came after was British Leyland, and British Leyland was where great British cars went to die. But we're not there yet. Let's go back to where this all begins. The year is 1953. Britain is still rebuilding itself after the Second World War. The economy is bruised. The country needs foreign currency, and the best way to get it is to sell cars to Americans. So the British motor industry points itself west, like a compass needle finding north. Standard Triumph, the company that owned the Triumph name at the time, launches the TR2. It costs somewhere between $2,400 and $2,700 in the American market. For that money, you get a 90-horsepower engine, a 4-speed gearbox, and a top speed of over 100 miles per hour. In 1953, that is genuinely extraordinary value. The TR2 is raw. It has cutaway doors. Instead of proper roll-up windows, it uses side curtains, basically canvas flaps, held in place by hope and a few press studs. Creature comforts are non-existent, but Americans don't care. They love it. A modified TR2 had already set a speed record at Jabbeke in Belgium, hitting over 124 miles per hour on a public road. That kind of story travels fast. By the time the TR3 arrives in 1955 and the TR3A in 1958, the formula is locked in. Nearly 80% of every Triumph sports car built is shipped straight to the United States, 8,000 units a year. The American buyer has become Triumph's most important customer, more important than the home market, more important than anywhere else on earth. And that is the world the TR4 is born into. A world where America is watching, waiting, and willing to spend. But Triumph has a problem, a big one, and solving it will change everything. By the late 1950s, the TR3A is selling well, but the people inside Standard Triumph know the clock is ticking. The car is fundamentally old. Those canvas side curtains were already starting to look embarrassing. The body style had roots that stretched back to the late 40s. Competitors were moving forward, and the American buyer, loyal as he was not blind. The company needs a completely new look, and here is where the story takes a turn nobody quite expects. Triumph's managing director, a man named Alec Dick, is introduced to an Italian designer based in Turin. His name is Giovanni Michelotti. At the time, Michelotti is working for Ferrari. He is working for Maserati. He is one of the most sought-after automotive stylists in Europe. And now, Standard Triumph wants him to draw the next British sports car. Think about that for a moment. The British motor industry, so proud of its identity, hands the pen to an Italian to define what a Triumph should look like. And Michelotti delivers something extraordinary. The project is given an internal code name. They call it Zest, which tells you everything about what they were going for. Not safe, not cautious, Zest. The TR4 that emerges is a revelation. Gone are the cutaway doors. Gone are the side curtains. In their place, proper wind-up glass windows, a wider stance. Clean, flat flanks, what they called slab sides that swept the old-fashioned separate wing design into the dustbin of history. The dashboard is more organized. The boot trunk is actually usable, a rarity on a sports car of that era, and the whole thing sits lower, wider, and more purposeful than anything the TR line had produced before. Under the bonnet, the engine carries over from the TR3A, but is bored out to 2,138 cubic centimeters. It produces 105 horsepower. The steering is now rack and pinion, sharper and more communicative than what came before. And for the first time, you can order an optional Surrey top, a removable hard panel over the cabin that gave drivers something between a Roadster and a coupe. Years before the term Targa existed, Triumph was already doing it. The TR4 goes on sale in 1961. Production officially begins on the 18th of July. But here is a detail that almost never gets mentioned. Triumph's dealer network in America is nervous. They have customers who are still buying TR3As, still loyal to the old shape. So Triumph makes a decision that is either brilliant or desperate, depending on how you look at it. They keep building the TR3B, a late version of the old car, running it in parallel with the brand new TR4 through 1961 and into 1962. Two completely different cars, same showroom, 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the future. It's a hedge, and it tells you something important about how much American opinion mattered to this company. They weren't going to risk losing those customers, not even for a moment. But the TR4 doesn't need protecting, because once Americans get behind the wheel, there's no going back. The American response to the TR4 is immediate. From 1962 onwards, buyers flood into Triumph dealerships. The numbers tell the story plainly. Sales peak in 1962, and the car moves at roughly 8,000 units a year. Nearly 80% of every TR4 built crosses the Atlantic. America is not just Triumph's biggest market. America is Triumph's reason for existing as a sports car company. And it's not just road buyers who fall for it. Out in California, a man named Cass Kastner is paying close attention. Kastner is an engineer, sharp, methodical, obsessive about preparation. He works as service supervisor for Triumph on the West Coast, and he sees something in the TR4 that goes beyond the showroom. He sees a race car. Kastner teams up with a driver named Bob Tullius, a name that would become legendary in American motorsport over the following decades, and they go to work. In 1962, they enter the TR4 in SCCA competition and win the E-Production National Championship. The car is so dominant that officials at the SCCA reclassify it upward, moving it into the tougher D production class. Tullius wins that class title in 1963, then wins it again in 1964. 2 consecutive championships in a class they were pushed into because they were winning too easily in the class below. Let that land for a second. Then comes Sebring. In 1963, Kastner has a plan that seems almost absurd in its ambition. He prepares 3 TR4 CES in California. He then flies all 3 cars to Florida for the 12-hour race. The team includes Bob Tullius, Charlie Gates, Peter Bolton from England, and several others. Against 65 entries from manufacturers across the world, the 3 Triumph TR4s finish 22nd, 24th, and 35th overall. But in their class, they finish 1st, 2nd, and 4th. That Sebring effort becomes the foundation of something bigger. Triumph formally creates what they call the competition department, with Kastner at the head of it. A small British sports car company now has an official racing program in America, built specifically around American tracks, American drivers, and American competition rules. By 1965, a Kastner-prepared TR4A driven by Charlie Gates wins the SCCA D Modified Championship at Daytona. The car beats Ferraris, not British club racers, not weekend amateurs. Factory-prepared Ferraris, a Triumph, built in Coventry, beats Italian Exotica on American soil. Then comes Sebring again in 1966, 4 TR4As, now fitted with the new independent rear suspension. 3 of them finish. They take 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in class, a perfect podium sweep at one of the most prestigious endurance races in the world. This is the Triumph TR4 at its peak, respected on the road, victorious on the track, loved in America. And built, quietly, with an Italian's eye for proportion and a Coventry factory's understanding of what a driver actually needs. But something is already stirring in the background, something that will eventually swallow all of this whole. And it begins, as these things often do, with a merger that everyone is told will be good for everyone. Before we get to what went wrong, let's make sure you understand what the TR4 was up against and how it held its own anyway. In the early 1960s, the British sports car market in America is genuinely competitive. The MGB arrives in 1962, the same year the TR4 hits its sales peak. Heelys are out there. The Sunbeam Alpine is fighting for the same buyers. These are not weak competitors. These are real cars, with real followings. And yet the TR4 outsells them, outhandles them in competition, and earns a reputation for being the driver's choice, the one that rewards you when you push it, the one that doesn't hide what it's doing underneath you. Part of that is the chassis. The TR4 uses a development of the TR3As, platform conservative in some ways, but sorted. The rack and pinion steering gives it a directness that buyers notice immediately. The 4-speed gearbox, with an optional Laycock overdrive that could be engaged across second, third, and fourth gears, effectively gives the driver a 7-ratio transmission. On long American highways, that overdrive unit is the difference between arriving relaxed and arriving exhausted. The car weighs just over 960 kilograms. That is light. Not by today's standards. Today's cars have gained enormous weight from safety equipment and electronics, but by the standards of 1962, the TR4 is a genuine lightweight. Combined with 105 horsepower and that responsive steering, it feels fast in a way that numbers alone don't capture. Now, if you want to subscribe to this channel, and I genuinely hope you do, hit that button right now. Every week we go deep on the cars that actually shaped history, the ones with real stories behind them, not just specification sheets. Subscribe. Drop a comment below telling me which Triumph you think was the finest of the whole TR lineage. Give the video a like if you're enjoying this. And if you've got a mate who loves classic British cars, share it with him. Right, back to the story. By 1965, the TR4 is replaced by the TR4A. The changes are evolutionary rather than revolutionary. The body stays essentially the same, which Michelotti designed so well that there was little reason to alter it. But underneath, something significant happens. The TR4A gets a fully independent rear suspension as standard on most markets. It is a proper modern chassis now, not just an updated pre-war design. The ride improves, the handling becomes more predictable at the limit, and those Sebring victories of 1966 are the direct result of this development. Total production of the TR4 runs from 1961 to 1965, 40,253 units. The TR4A then adds another 28,450 by the time it ends in 1967. Between the two, Triumph put nearly 70,000 of these cars into the world, the overwhelming majority of them into American hands. That is not a footnote, that is a statement. America chose this car, again and again, over everything else available at the price. But here's the uncomfortable truth hiding inside those numbers. Even as the TR4A reaches its peak, something is already unraveling inside the company that builds it. The TR4A's final production year is 1967, and in 1968, the world that made the TR4 possible simply ceases to exist. Because in 1968, British Leyland is born, and nothing is ever the same again. 1968, the year of the Mexico Olympics, the year of the Apollo program circling the moon, the year the Beatles released the White Album, and in Britain, the year the government decides to solve the crisis in the domestic car industry by merging everything into one enormous company. British Leyland Motor Corporation is created from the union of Leyland Motors and British Motor Holdings. On paper, it controls nearly 40% of the entire British car market. It owns Rover. It owns Triumph. It owns Austin, Morris, MG, and Jaguar. It operates close to 40 manufacturing plants across the country. It employs hundreds of thousands of people. It sounds like strength. It is, in fact, a slow-motion catastrophe. The problem is structural, and it is human. These brands had spent decades as bitter rivals. Austin men despised Morris men. Triumph engineers looked sideways at MG. Rover and Jaguar considered themselves above the whole argument, and now they are all told to be one family, share resources, share platforms, share futures. The result is not efficiency. The result is corporate civil war conducted in meeting rooms and on factory floors simultaneously. A good idea from the Triumph division would be quietly strangled by someone from Austin. A promising new model from Rover would be delayed because it competed with something from MG. The internal politics are so corrosive that the company's ability to develop genuinely competitive new products begins to rot from the inside out. And the cars show it. The 1971 Morris Marina is perhaps the most damning evidence. It is a brand new car, launched with new tooling, sold as modern. Its suspension design traces back to the 1948 Morris Minor, a car built in 1971, with suspension engineered in 1948. British Leyland isn't moving forward. It is treading water in concrete. The labour situation makes everything worse. The 1970s in Britain are defined by industrial unrest that is almost impossible to describe to someone who didn't live through it. Strikes are not occasional disruptions, they are the rhythm of working life. In January of 1977 alone, a major strike at the Castle Bromwich plant halts Rover SD1 production entirely. The Triumph plant at Canley faces its own rounds of unrest. Management and workforce are locked in a permanent state of mutual distrust. Meanwhile, in Japan, Toyota and Datsun are quietly building a reputation for doing exactly the opposite. Their cars are reliable. They start in the morning. They don't rust in 2 years. They are not exciting, but they are there when you need them. And the American buyer, who loved the TR4 for its character, begins to wonder if character is enough. The oil crisis of 1973 finishes off what mismanagement started. Fuel prices spike, consumer priorities shift, and the big, thirsty, sporty Roadster looks suddenly impractical to a generation queuing at petrol stations. British Leyland, already financially crippled, goes bankrupt in 1975 and is nationalized by the government. Triumph, the company that had once built something beautiful enough to beat Ferraris at Daytona, is now a division of a state-owned failure. But they try one more time, and the result is almost worse than giving up. In 1975, British Leyland launches the Triumph TR4. It is meant to be the car that saves everything, the car that recaptures the American market, the car that proves British engineering still has something to say. It is a wedge-shaped car, angular, low, designed by a committee that had studied what American safety regulations might eventually require and built the compromises directly into the bodywork. It looks like a drawing of a car, not quite like a car itself. The proportions are strange, the execution is uneven, and the build quality, the thing that the TR4 had always managed to get right despite its simplicity, is genuinely, embarrassingly poor. Reports from American buyers talk about electrical faults, rust appearing within the first year, doors that don't close properly, engines that overheat. These are not isolated complaints. They are the predictable result of a company that has lost the ability to concentrate on the product because it is too busy managing industrial chaos. The TR4 sells roughly 100,000 units over its production run. Compare that to the TR4 and TR4A combined nearly 70,000 in just 6 years, when the American market was smaller, when there was more competition, and when the car cost real money. The TR4 limps to its numbers over a longer period, in a market that had grown considerably, and it never achieves the cultural presence its predecessors had built. A convertible version of the TR4, called the TR8, arrives later with a Rover V8 engine. In testing and in the right hands, it is genuinely fast. A TR8 even wins the Olympus Rally in 1980. But it comes too late, in too small numbers, with too damaged a reputation surrounding it. The TR8 is a glimpse of what might have been if British Leyland had kept its focus 15 years earlier. In 1980, the decision is made. The Triumph plant at Canley, in Coventry, the factory where TR4s were built, where the men who raced at Sebring had their cars prepared, closes for good. Vehicle production in Coventry ends. In 1984, the Triumph name makes its last appearance on a car. That car is the Triumph Acclaim. It is a Honda Civic, built under license, with a Triumph badge fitted to the bonnet. There is nothing wrong with the Honda Civic. It is a reliable, sensible, well-engineered small car, but it is not a Triumph. It shares nothing with the spirit of a car that once took an Italian designer's vision and turned it into something that could beat Ferraris on the banking at Daytona. The name Triumph dies in 1984, quietly, without a proper send-off. And the TR4, the car that started all of this, the car that had proved what Triumph was truly capable of, sits in garages and at classic car shows, still running, still turning heads, still doing exactly what it was built to do. Some things outlast the companies that made them. The TR4 is one of them. But there is a lesson buried in all of this, and it's worth sitting with for a moment.